Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Western London Astronomical Society. A few different faces this time. Some partners of people who have attended the eclipse. But you're all welcome, and if there are any new or prospective members, then please, if there's anything you want to know, just let me know, or let one of the committee members know. Stuart, I think, is the only one who's actually got a badge around him at the moment.
Oh.
But, I'm sure we can.
Badge of honour.
You can make contact somehow. Okay, as you will have gathered, this meeting is about the eclipse of April the 8th, and funny enough, that featured at last month's meeting as well over at Uxbridge, because the actual eclipse relay took place literally minutes before the meeting started. And just as we were getting underway, we had a phone call from Sue and Tim to say that they'd seen it, and so we were able to put the microphone next to my phone, and we heard them loud and clear. But now they're in person, and so are their slides. So Stuart is going to be the master of ceremonies for this, because he's put together the slides and will supervise the movement of the various speakers one for the other. So over to you, Stuart.
Okay, and yes, a meeting would coincide with the eclipse something like once every 200 years. But the funny thing about working that out was having to treat eclipses and Wolas meetings as completely random events. That caused a little bit of a problem, but that's the only way that you can work out those odds. Okay, so there's the eclipse. That is totality, where Sue, Tim, myself, Chris, Paula, we were there at Waxahachie, just south of Dallas, and the skies cleared just wonderfully, just moments before totality, and stayed clear for the rest of the eclipse. That's the path of the totality, and it covers America perfectly. Just look at that. You can design an eclipse to cover America better than what we had there the other week, 5 weeks ago today. And you can see that it covers North America, it covers Canada, it covers Central America perfectly. We're going to have reports from people along the path, starting with Srinath and Fasanta, who saw it on the coast. Moving through there, the rest of the people that you can see there, you'll know some of those people already. You will by the end of the evening. That is the summary of eclipses from 1999 to 2019, and there's the Cornwall eclipse 1999, there it is, and this was the same eclipse in the Saros cycle, because you'll be aware that eclipses, they repeat at intervals of 18 years, 11 days and 8 hours, and that 8 hours causes the pattern to move a third of the way around the globe. And you can see here that is crossover point where the 1999 and the 2006 eclipses coincided. It's not on that map, but it is in this next image taken from space. And those are satellite images of the two eclipses superimposed on top of one another from space. This is what we all looked at very carefully to judge where we're going to go to see the eclipse. And you can see there that Mexico had the best prospects. The further you go, Duncan has got the complete map, which goes to New England, and it just gets worse as you go further along the path. But the best chances were in Mexico. But going to Mexico, you really had to join a group largely. Most people who went to Mexico joined groups. Okay, so Srinath and Fasanta, would you like to start by talking about your experience?
Thank you, Stuart. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. I'm Srinath, and this is my wife, Vasanta, and we both traveled to Mexico to see the eclipse. I think I'll let you speak about the planning, which took quite a while. We planned about 2 years before, where do we go to? I had family in Houston, and they said, come and stay with us, and in Austin, Texas, and they said it's only 20 miles out of Austin that you can see the eclipse totality. Well, when I looked at Fred Espenak's charts, and Sky and Telescope had a whole edition on the eclipse, the recent eclipse, and they said the best weather prospects were not in Texas. I'm sorry to say that. I know some of you went to Texas, And what they said was Texas weather this time of the year resembles almost spring in Britain. It could be clouded out. So we chose Mexico. Basanta did a lot of planning to find us an accommodation in a town called Mazatlan. I've never heard about Mazatlan, but that's where it the North American peninsula there.
And I mean, of course, the people who heard we were going to Mexico and to Mazatlan were horrified, because that's Sinaloa cartel country.
Yeah.
They said, "You're not going there, are you mad?" And I was like, well, apparently the Eclipse is going there, so we're going there. Unfortunately for us, being Indian has an advantage. You almost have someone, friend, family, cousin 10 times removed in some country, anywhere. So, having spoken to friends, I have someone I grew up with, he's 10 years younger than me, and he grew up with me back in India, and their winter home is in Mexico, and their summer homes in Vancouver.
They're what are called the digital nomads. They work anywhere and they can work from anywhere.
And it was just by chance that we met them the previous year, and he said, "Oh, come to us." So I rang him and said, "We're coming to you." So they'd already planned the Eclipse. They already had people staying with them, who they threw out because we were coming. And these were friends who stayed with them many times before, so they got thrown out of it. We were told that we weren't allowed to drive ourselves. They said, "Do not even think about hiring a car and driving across Mexico." They live in Sailita, which is near Puerto Vallarta. It's about 8-hour drive. So we flew to Puerto Vallarta from Atlanta, stayed with them, and then they drove us. And I just said, he said, "It's an 8-hour drive." I said, "Can't we just drive at night? Because that's what I do. If we want to go to Glasgow, we drive at night." He said, "Are you mad? Nobody drives at night."
Night in Mexico, that's
So waited for daybreak and then drove across. And we were lucky. We didn't get stopped, raided. Apparently you can get stopped and have, if they find lots of money, because you can only deal in cash, nobody takes cards, they will just take it all off you, and you have no idea whether they're police, not police. There's no recourse, there's no receipt, obviously. So we had bits of cash in every place, every pocket, under the seat, in bits of luggage. It was fun. So we get there, and we were lucky we actually...
So we actually flew to Atlanta first, and then from Atlanta it's another 4-hour flight. And the time zones vary. Atlanta is Eastern time, then you go to Central time, and when you get to Puerto Vallarta and then to Mazatlan, it's Pacific time. And some people had T-shirts printed with the wrong time of the totality. So if you stayed in bed thinking that T-shirt is right, you'd have missed it all. And they were being sold online actually. So the time zones had their effect on. So
we were lucky that we actually had somewhere to stay. The friends we were staying with, the other people, they got there. The place didn't exist.
yeah.
The person they communicated with didn't exist, so they had nowhere to stay. They literally had to find someone.
So online accommodation, I think obviously it was a big business opportunity for a poor country like Mexico. There were thousands of people offering Airbnb and everything else. People turned up there after having paid their advances, and there's nothing, non-existent. We stayed in a small hotel, 4th floor, no lift, terrible plumbing. It was basically a dump. But our friend from Vancouver had booked places in Holiday Inn, and they were all sold out. But they very kindly offered us to join them, and that's the view from the penthouse or the rooftop of the Holiday Inn. And the gunboat you see there is where the president of Mexico had come to view the eclipse, and he was viewing it from that gunboat there. As Stuart said, the eclipse started in the south of the Pacific, about 3,500 kilometers away from where we were, and for the first 85 minutes it was over the sea. And it first touched landmass 100 kilometers away from where we are, in an island called Isla Marias. I don't know if it's inhabited or if anybody went there, but there were cruise ships which had sailed into the Pacific to view the eclipse as well. So this is from Mazatlan, that's the coast. And the Holiday Inn had actually laid out an eclipse brunch. So this is before the people had come up. There were food, there were drinks, and it was like a kind of a party.
And the mimosas went down rather.
This is again a view from the...
I only put this up because of the birds.
Yeah.
The pelicans started.
The pelicans started disappearing as
As it started getting dark, they were all flying across.
And if you look at the cloud cover, there was a light cumulus, but it wasn't terrible. It was, quite good. And that's Mazatlan town itself. It has about 500,000 people living there, and it was inundated by tourists. And
That's how that's why the light is a bit
Yeah.
different. When you get that really weird light, it isn't sun and it isn't dark and it isn't twilight really. So that was midway eclipse.
anyway, the optics I took was a C-Star smart telescope. And if you see that edition of the Sky telescope, it actually advertises this will take great photographs of the eclipse. But when we took it there, it failed completely because of a lack of Wi-Fi connection. Mexico has got poor internet services anyway, and they said there are thousands of people who have descended with their smartphones, whatever, so it just wasn't loading, it just wasn't finding its satellite. It's entirely dependent on a satellite and a Wi-Fi connection with my phone, so we couldn't do any pictures, and that was a big disappointment, because we had photographed the previous eclipse in Idaho with the DSLR camera, and we should have done that, rather than rely on this. It's so light to carry, it was easy thing to take with us. And that's the two of us. That DSLR, I had a solar filter on it, but
We just decided not to use it and just enjoy ourselves because it was the last minute. We thought, forget about trying to set up the tripod, set up anything. Let's just see.
And that was a totality at Mazatlan, taken by one of our friends. It's someone's picture I borrowed. I took one picture with my iPhone finally, and you can see, at totality, you can see the planet Venus, I think, that is Venus there. Couldn't see Mercury, couldn't see anything else, but you also see a drone flying there, that green dot above that building. Someone had flown a drone there, and it was flashing red and green light at that point. All in all, it was a good visit. We saw phases C1 to C4 beautifully, everything from first contact to the last. It was perfect weather, perfect. It would have been a lovely eclipse to photograph as well, with 4 minutes of totality, 4 minutes and 17 seconds at Mazatlan. So that was our experience in Mazatlan. But what I've decided now is I'll rely on an old DSLR and a tripod rather than a smart telescope. Thank you very much.
Okay. Put in my top pocket, right. We've got lots of slides to go through, so I'm going to zip through this, and although I've written out loads of words, I'm going to try not to say them all, but in complete contrast to what you've just heard, we booked a trip to Mexico to see the eclipse. Why did we go there? Well, here we go. I'm going to go through the spiel. We went to see the eclipse. I've never been to South America before. Neither's Jane. I don't know how many other people here have been to South America, but it is a stunning place to go to.
They actually call it Mesoamerica, the mid bit, Central America, between north and south. So we think
It was a combined trip as part of Jane's retirement and me wanting to see the eclipse, so we put it all together. And Jane managed to get a late booking, which I guess was a cancellation, with a tour company called Astro Trails, sorry. And they did us okay. I'd go with them again, and if any of you are thinking of going with them, I wouldn't have a problem recommending them. Just a general discussion. When you go to see an eclipse, you do need to go with something else in mind. To go halfway around the world and it's cloudy, which is what happened to us. You'll see the pictures. I'm not showing any eclipse pictures because Stuart's got all those. When we went to the place which was supposed to be the clearest, and it was cloudy, so we didn't get to see that. But you do need to have something else to make the trip worthwhile, and our tour was based around seeing the eclipse, but also seeing the Mayan remains in Mexico. So if we move on to the next slide, we had an itinerary, going very quickly through the itinerary. We started off in Mexico City. We had a few days in Mexico City. We went to see one of the Mayan remains just outside Mexico City, which we'll come to in a minute. We then went to the middle of Mexico, up into the plains, which are a very arid area, and that's the place, if you look at the next slide,
So we started off here in Mexico City. We went to Teotihuacan to see the remains there. We came back to Mexico City. You had a day in Mexico City, and then we went up to Monterrey and out to a place called Torreon, which is on the slide that Stuart showed, which has the lowest potential for cloud cover. So should have been the best place to go see the eclipse. And we saw the eclipse from a university in the arid zone, so we drove for an hour out in the morning on a coach to the middle of nowhere where there was a university, and they hosted us there, and you'll see the rest of that. After the eclipse we came back to Monterrey, we flew down to Cancun, and we then went backwards and forwards across the Yucatan Peninsula. This piece here is the Yucatan Peninsula, seeing the Mayan sites and other things around here. Which is, well, we saw the eclipse, we really did see it, but we saw loads and loads of remains, and we'll come to that in a minute. So, just general points I learnt about Mexico while we were there. Mexico is a very big place. There aren't many the transport links at all. All there are in Mexico are roads. The roads are long and straight. Most of the transport goes by roads. They go by the double lorries you see in Australia. They are everywhere. They really are. So there's lorries all over the place. Mexico, as Srinath was saying, the police and the army are out everywhere. I guess they are trying to curtail the people going across the border, but they don't have small guns. We did see some people with little holsters, but most of them had large guns like that, and they favoured the utility vehicles where they had 4 people sitting in the back, a man on the top with a machine gun, and 2 people in the front, and they were everywhere as well. We didn't see any trouble though, I have to say. We didn't hear any gunshots either. We didn't see any trouble. Yeah. The other things I learnt about it, I won't go into this because you can look this up on Wikipedia, but the Spanish did come to the Mexican peninsula. They landed. They soon realised that the Mayan people didn't have gold. They had very little, to be totally honest, because most of Mexico, and particularly the Yucatan Peninsula, is a limestone area. There is no gold. They had no treasures to speak of, so they went off and they conquered the Aztecs, and the Aztecs had loads of gold, and the Spanish were happy. So the Mayans were left alone until later on when the Spanish did come back, and I'll go to that in a minute. There were 2 sailors though that part of the initial landings that stayed in Mexico. One married one of the local chief's daughters, made him his wife, and most of the Mayan people that now remain, and there are still lots of Mayans remaining, are descended from this couple that happened a long while ago. So I won't go into that. You can look it up on Wikipedia. It's a long story. What the Mexico does have, and the Spanish came back for, is flax. Flax is a fibrous plant, fibrous material, and you use it for making ropes, making fabrics, making whatever. And the Spanish came back and they took the flax, and they set up flax farms, and they set up empires there. And again, you'll see that in a minute. This is Mexico City. Mexico City is I'll get to that in a minute. Like I'm skipping past all these things. So how do we get there? We went from Heathrow to Mexico City. Mexico City, the flights to Mexico City are stupidly expensive. EasyJet doesn't go there, so it cost us arm and leg to get there, let alone the holiday itself. Taxis from the airport to the hotel, whatever you do, if you go to Mexico City, pay for the trip before you get in the cab, because they'll rip you off like it's no tomorrow. And at the airport, they have little booths, and you say where you want to go to, you pay the person in the booth, they tell you which zone it's in, and you get a card, and you go and give that to the taxi driver, and that's it. Otherwise, the driver will take you all over everywhere. His meter doesn't work, and he'll charge you a fortune. Mexico is a huge city. This is a picture from a hotel roof, and this doesn't really show it, but you can see the hills out in the background there. We drove around some of those hills, and you'll see they are smothered in people. People live everywhere. The pollution is very extensive. That shows some of the pollution in front of the hillside. Some of the other photos we took, and we took, like everybody, we took thousands of photographs. Some of them show worse pollution than that. The population in Mexico City is staggering. In 2020, the population of Mexico City was 9.5 million. In 2022, that's 2 years later, it was 22 million. So that's 2 and a bit times more it's in 2024. So it's in 4 years, 2 and a bit times as many people. While we were in Mexico City, we had a spare day, and we went to see the anthropological, that's the word, museum. And if ever you go to Mexico City, it's one of the places you have to go to. This is the main courtyard, and that roof is massive, stands on its own, one pillar in the middle, which has got fountains around the outside. It's got to be 40 metres long, or 50 metres long by 30 metres wide. It is massive. I can't understand why, if it was windy, it doesn't get blown over. But that's a superb museum. It ranks apparently as one of the best museums in the world to go and see. If you want to run through some other of the pictures, these are objects which are in the museum that have been taken from the Mayan sites around Mexico, and they are stunning. You could have spent a whole day there.
You're almost like
Yeah.
it's a real place.
Yeah.
As well, massive.
We got to a stage where we go back on that. We got to a stage where at the museum we stopped looking at things because we were going to see things that we would see in the Mayan tours later on. So we just saw so much. It's gobsmacking. You have to go to that museum if you go to Mexico. So moving on, when we went to the museum, we walked through one of their large parks, and there was an exhibition of photographs of bats. This is a combined photograph image of some of the pictures, but these are bats which come from Mexico, and the images were stunning. I don't know how they take images. There must be flash photos of bats, but the images were stunning, and the images were blown up bigger than the whole of the screen there individually. So that was a great day out. The next picture, Mexico does have earthquakes. There's a fault line in the Pacific Ocean off the side of Mexico. It does have earthquakes. This was in our first hotel. Don't use the elevator in earthquakes, or in case of fire, don't use the elevator. There was actually one very large earthquake, magnitude 8 in 1985, which killed 5,000 people. And there's still at least one large tower block in Mexico City being rebuilt because of that earthquake. So on the next day, moving on, we took a trip outside. We haven't got to the Eclipse yet, but this is perhaps one of the places you'll see in films where they show Mayan temples. This is at a place called Teotihuacan. It is a massive site. This is at one end of it, and this was when we got there in the morning, and our coach must have been one of the early ones to get there. It is massive. You're not allowed to climb up any of the temples anymore. You used to be able to, apart from one. We did climb up it. Later in the morning, as you can see, just a few other people arrived. The extras for films. This is Jane coming down the one small temple that you could climb up, and you could climb up and go over it. But that's the only one that remains that you can actually climb. It's very touristy, to say the least. And to be honest, we had to, just sticking with that photo, we had to get back in our coach to drive down to the other end of the site to get back out again to see more ruins at the other end of the site. It's a massive township, that one was. Mexico City, go back to Mexico City, on the journey to Teotihuacan, here's an interesting thing. All the hillsides are covered in what were favelas, where people put up timber shacks and the like. And over time, over the last 20 years, the timber shacks have been converted into block and brick houses, and they're painted in funny colours. Then there are multiple colours, there's blues, there's pinks, there's greens, there's whatever. And the story behind that is that politicians offered to paint the people's houses if they would vote for them. So if you look on the hillside, if you saw a predominance of blue, I guess whoever the blue politician was, that's his hillside. So that's an interesting topic. And the other interesting thing is that as Mexico City is such a sprawling city, and these are on the hills outside it, the people that live in these favelas can't get into the city because they haven't got cars. So the Mexican government have put cable cars in, and they are everywhere. Literally on all the hillsides. There's one going that way, there's one going up that way. You can't see one in this one, you can see it in the next picture. The cable cars connect all the hills together. I don't know how much it costs. The cable cars come down to a coach station, if that's the right word of it, on the outskirts of the city, where the people get out of the cable cars and they go in a coach. So that's the interesting point about Mexico City. Colours on the hillside, pictures of the mountain, we've done that one, we're getting there, trying to curtail this. So on to the Eclipse. So this is the slide that Stuart showed you at the beginning of, to start with. We went to Torreon, which is supposed to have had the best chance of cloud cover, not Texas and up here, but it was cloud. Well, you'll see from some of the photos that Stuart's got that we could see the eclipse, you could see totality, and some of the people that were with us, some of the instruments they had, took nice pictures of the eclipse. And there's some nice videos which may or may not get shown. But that's why we went to Torreon. We got to Torreon flying from Mexico City to Monterrey, and we then drove from Monterrey to Torreon, and everywhere you seem to go outside the city, away from the hills, you see thousands of these white houses. And I often wondered what they were since we were there, so I checked on Wikipedia, and I discovered today that this was a failed attempt by the Mexican government to provide houses for the many, and there are thousands and thousands of generic houses that all look similar or the same. A lot of them haven't yet been connected to water or sewage or whatever, and apparently it's a complete flop. It cost $100 billion to build them. So moving on, next slide. This is the view from our hotel in Torreon. Our hotel was perhaps one of the tallest things, and it wasn't very tall, it was 8 stories. Everything else around there is flat and small, and the white buildings. Next picture. So we drove out to the university on the Zona Aridis, so the dry zone, which is on the plains. And moving on again, we stood on their playing fields. There was hundreds of us there. We were each given a little square, or they marked out a little square, and everybody stood in their little square, which was quite good. But as you can see, we had a blanket of cloud. The cloud was thinner than the pictures make out, to be honest, and you could see the sun through the clouds. There's an issue trying to photograph the sun through the clouds, because if you put a solar filter on the front of your camera, it's so dark, the sun is so dark and dim, you can't see the sun. So you take the solar filter off, and then a bit of cloud gets thinner, and then you have to put the solar cloud back on. Nightmare. So my photographs of the eclipse weren't very good at all. Due to coach issues as well, we didn't get there very early. We had very little time to set up. But pictures of the eclipse, Stuart will show us pictures of the eclipse later on. Ironically, as Jane will tell you, we jumped on one too many there. Ironically, as Jane will tell you, just as the eclipse was happening, there was a patch of clear earth sky that didn't quite get to us in time. So that was the eclipse, and you'll hear about that from other people. With the eclipse over, we went back to Torreon, back to Monterrey, and then flew from Monterrey to Cancun, and we started to go around the Yucatan Peninsula looking at the Mayan remains. On the way, we stopped at a hotel in a place called Meridia, which is a lovely place. If you want to go to somewhere in Mexico, outside of the big cities, Meridia is lovely. It's favoured by the American tourists and the American retirees because their money buys them lots, and it is a nice place. Very nice. Before we got there, we went to the second of our Mayan settlements. This is a settlement of Coba. This picture here, you'll see this image again, but on a different scale. The Mayan people had a game that the men used to play with a leather ball. They had 2 teams, and without using their feet, the teams used to have to. There's a repeat of this over here, facing the other way. The 2 teams used to have to somehow get this ball through that hole there. The team that got it through were the winning team, and the captain of the winning team was then sacrificed, and it was an honour to be sacrificed. So I don't understand that one, but you win and then you lose. So he was sacrificed to the gods. But this is a game that's played in lots of the Mayan sites, and that this shape appears all over the place. Cobra is still surrounded by jungle, as you can see. Unlike Teotihuacan, where they cleared the jungle, the Mexican army cleared it with explosives and God knows what. Cobra still remains in the jungle. It's within the trees, as you can see, and it was very hot, to say the least. The day before it had been in the 40 degrees C there. It wasn't quite that when we were there, but it was very hot. And that was a nice place to go. It's a nice visit. We've discussed the Mexican ball game, the Mayan ball game, sorry. Moving swiftly on again. Yeah, these things are everywhere. What are they? The iguanas. Taste like chicken. Everybody that says that's an iguana say they taste like chicken. And they do eat a lot of chicken in Mexico, by the way, so maybe it's iguana you're eating, I don't know. Outside of Cobra does have one thing that many other places don't have in Mexico, and that is a lake, but the lake is full of alligators. So they don't go in it very often. On the way back from Cobra, we stopped in a little town called Valladolid. And we saw perhaps our one and only real Mayan person. This is a Mayan lady, and I guess she was in her 30s, 40s-ish. I'm just guessing, but if you try to look at the size of her compared to this guy here, she was perhaps 4 foot tall, and that's something apparently which is one of the hallmarks of an original Mayan person. So that's the only time we saw anybody of that size at all. Apparently, if you look on Wikipedia, there are still about 6 million Mayans in existence in between Mexico and Guatemala. However. But if you go, we move back then to our hotel in Mérida, and Mérida is very famous for lots of big haciendas. When the flax trade started, lots of the farm owners, the Spanish farm owners, built themselves these superb houses. They're now owned by banks or they're museums, but there's a whole street full of these absolutely massive houses. And our hotel was actually opposite one. The next day we went to the ancient city of Uxmal. This is another city, another Mayan remains that you'll see on the films. It was perhaps the best set of ruins, and it wasn't, again, too touristy. There's a few pictures of Uxmal. We were allowed to walk around on our own this place. We obviously had a tour, but you then got a couple of hours to go around on your own, and it was a nice place to go. Very nice place to be. Yeah, and there's snakes all over the place. They warn you about the wildlife. The wildlife is never very far away from you, and apparently if you leave a piece of land for 2 years, it's then taken back by the jungle. And
I did hear some kind of wild cat there, so that's quite frightening. So that's next to those buildings.
Yeah.
We sort of ran from there, didn't
we were with a young lady. We were with a young lady who was a bit fearless, and there was a sign saying "Go to so and so and so and so." So we walked off down this path in amongst the trees, and then when we heard this noise, we turned around and walked straight back again. This one. From Mérida we drove to our last hotel site via perhaps the one place that most people have heard of, Chichen Itza. This is one of the few places that we found that had any astronomical content. This is an observatory building at Chichen Itza, and it's called the Caracol. It's called the Caracol because it's got a spiral staircase in the middle of it, which apparently is that's what the Mexicans call spiral staircases. But this is on one side of Chichen Itza. There's some other photos of Chichen Itza coming up in a minute now. Yeah, so these are the pictures you see when people talk about, oh, we saw Mayan remains. Carvings everywhere, loads of photos of carvings. This is stopping there, this is that ball game again, there's the hoop there and there's a hoop over here somewhere. How the hell they got the ball up there without using their feet, Don't ask me.
Did you use the hands either?
No?
Or hands, was it? It was just joint, basically.
Class. And the ball, apparently the ball was quite a heavy weighted ball. So yeah, there's lots and lots. There's archaeology everywhere there. So we're going to move on again to the next slide. This is on one side of Checheniska is the observatory. You come back to the middle to all the remains, and you go off in the other direction. There is a cenote. This is a limestone area, so there's lots of water underground in pools. This is a cenote that doesn't have a roof. I guess the roof was caved in. But it's particularly relevant to Checheniska because this is where they used to sacrifice girls. The story goes that girls were allowed to wear sacred robes and heavy ornaments and all the gold and bits and pieces for a day and be worshipped for a day. At the end of the day, they were thrown into the cenote. And most of them died. Surprise, surprise, because they had all these heavy robes on, apart from one, apparently, who was still afloat in the morning after, and they fished her out, and they said it was a miracle, and so be it. So, on the way back from Checheniska, we stopped in the jungle, and we went down. It was quite a strange place. The coach down this dirt track turned into a little opening. There was a changing shed, if you call it that, and then a little covered area with a spiral staircase going down to the ground. And you went down 18 metres into the ground, and there's one of the other cenotes that's still got its roof, and you could swim in the cenote. Surprisingly, I thought this was going to be bloody freezing, but actually it was quite warm water, despite it.
It was 30 metres deep, so you could see right to the bottom.
Yes.
Completely clear.
Yeah.
Apparently there's hundreds of these.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, one of our other people on our tour went on a trip to go to lots of these other cenotes. Although this is quite a basic complex at ground level, a couple of guys did start to wander off into the bush, and one of the staff stopped them and said, come back, because of the wild animals. And Jane was standing filming some butterflies and disturbed the snake, which then disappeared off into the jungle. She did video. She was videoing the butterfly, but she got a video of the snake disappearing off. So you don't want to walk too far away from the paths over there, to say the least. That one. We're getting near the end here, guys. On our last stop at the hotel, this was all about Mayan remains. Our last stop was supposed to be a beach stop with a beachfront views, all these bits and pieces, in a place called Playa del Carmen. It's super touristy, so it's completely opposite of everything you've seen. Our hotel was on the side of the main street, and on the main street was just tourist restaurant, pharmacy, tourist restaurant, pharmacy, and in the pharmacy, over the counter, you could buy whatever you wanted. Anabolic steroids, all this stuff that you can't buy over here without a prescription. So if you need some medicine, hop over to Mexico and top up. It's horrendous. But there's one other place that we walked past. It's on the high street. You could have your photo taken with a tiger or a lion, and they were baby tigers and baby lions, but they were probably Labrador-sized tigers and lions. The guys didn't like you filming them, so I filmed this as I was kind of walking past. And this is a snippet out of a video, so rather than stand there and be a bit obvious, a snippet out of a video. I didn't see anybody in there with these animals, but when we were walking past one other evening, one of them was out the front, and they were desperately trying to get this thing back in. Whilst we were there, though, we had two excursions. We went on a catamaran trip from Cancun to an island off Cancun, the trip also included some snorkeling out in the ocean. As you can see, on one of those dots out there somewhere. It was all very controlled. The catamaran was great, it was good fun. They even sailed the catamaran back for us rather than drove it back. The snorkeling was okay, but there was very little to see. Everybody was corralled into the same area. What you can't see is the other 20 or 30 boats that are in a big circle around here, and they have coral police there making sure that nobody ventures off and does their own thing. So it was very controlled. That part of the trip was good, but when you got to this island, it was worse than the place we stayed at. It was tourists gone mad, really was. So that was that trip. But then we did this is Playa del Carmen, where we were. As you went down to the sea, we were supposed to be by the sea, but we weren't. As you went down to the sea, if you turned right, you had all the big restaurants and the beachside bars and the music and bits and pieces. If you turned left and went past all the posh hotels, you then got into this sort of area, which was rather nice. Interesting point here, those three people, we were on the beach that morning for 2 or 3 hours. They have a problem in that area with this seaweed, whatever it's called. It just keeps getting washed up and washed up and washed up. And they pay people to rake up the seaweed, and they've got a JCB that comes along. They rake it up into big piles. The JCB comes along and takes the pile away. And they work their way up the beach, they turn around, they come back again and do the same thing, and they turn around and go back. All day long, all morning long, they were going backwards and forwards, raking up more seaweed as it was getting washed up. What a job. What a job. But we then did our last excursion. We went to a beachside Mayan town. This one was called Tulum. And perhaps this was one of the best of all of them. It was the smallest one. Again, it wasn't very touristy. It was on the side of the sea, the Caribbean. Beautiful place to go. This actually is this a god? This is a god upside down. His head's down here. There are his feet up there. That's his skirt. He's coming down from heaven or from the upper world to the underworld. That was a lovely trip. It really was. And the Caribbean really is that blue, to say the least. Yeah, and just an interesting point. One interesting point was that last place that you just saw, Tulum, when the Spanish arrived in Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula, that was the only place that was still inhabited by the Mayans. All the other Mayan settlements that you've just seen pictures of had been vacated because there's like infighting within the different Mayan political people, and that was the only one that had actually got anybody still living there. After that, we came home. We could have gone down to the beach actually and had a swim. There's pelicans standing on the beach. We could have gone down to the beach and had a swim. We didn't have time. So we had a great time. We saw the eclipse. Stuart will show some of the pictures. Yeah, I'd do it again. I really would.
You've got your videos next.
Are they? Okay.
Point.
Okay.
Well worth seeing.
Which ones?
Just go on to the next one. That's
Okay,
it.
this is a video taken. I'm in there somewhere on the football pitch. This is a video taken by one of our members, not by me, and this is a time-lapse video of the moon shadow coming across here. So if you want to press play.
I'm trying to do that.
Yeah. This guy has been to see 23 other eclipses. So he's a season, and they've already booked for the next few. Yeah,
And the fact that you've got the cloud makes the shadow so very, very clearly visible, as you can all see there.
Yes.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That would never be visible if there wasn't the cloud there.
No. If you haven't seen a total eclipse, it is amazing the difference between an almost total eclipse, even though there's a little bit of the sun left, it's still quite bright. A total eclipse is dark. Because we had the clouds, you could see the 360 sunset all the way around. That's one of them. This was John, I don't know what his name is, John somebody's, and this is the other GoPro that you saw pointing upwards. And we're in the field here somewhere. His GoPro was a modern GoPro, and you could set the exposure time to remain, rather than change itself. I took it.
Like the eclipse itself, didn't it?
Yeah,
Give it a bright.
yeah. It looks like it. Yes. Have you put the other ones there, Stuart, or just those two?
Just those two.
Okay, that's all right.
Lovely.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Malcolm.
All right. Okay.
Right, so what Tim is just finding. There we go. So we travelled on an organised tour with a company called Omega, and we were lucky enough to travel with Pete Lawrence from the Sky at Night team and John Colshaw, the impersonator. We flew into Houston, went to the Space Centre, we went to Dallas, we went to Austin, but I'm going to concentrate on two particular places of interest that we actually went to. And the first place we went to that I'm going to talk to you about was the Alamo. So, the legendary Alamo. Iconic symbol of Texan independence from Mexico, depicted in songs and poems and films, well known, of course, John Wayne Western, and even a battle cry, "Remember the Alamo." So it stands in the heart of the city of San Antonio, which is about 80 miles from the state capital, Austin. Now, the famous siege took place in 1836, when around 200 revolutionaries, including the infamous Davy Crockett, William Travis, and James Bowie, died defending the fort against thousands of Mexican troops led by General Santa Anna. The fort was pounded for 13 days before it was retaken. Most of the battlefield, sadly, has been lost, and only two original buildings remain: the Alamo Church itself and the Long Barrack. The Alamo Church, or shrine as it became to be known, is probably the most recognised structure on this site. It was originally built as a Spanish missionary church from 1755 to 1793. About 75 to 80% of the building is original. It was never completed. It always lacked a roof, and this allowed the back of the nave to serve as an artillery position during the battle. The Long Barrack, the oldest building on the site, and it dates back to 1724, and it was originally built as living quarters for Spanish missionaries. Since then, it's become a military hospital, and it was used as a garrison quarters during the siege. And it's now a small, interesting museum. This is the Long Barrack, this long building you can see here at the bottom. Now I'm going to go back to William Travis. Legend has it that during the last few days of the battle, Travis realised that he was completely surrounded by 2,000 Mexican soldiers, and he had 190 men that had sustained 5 days of continuous bombardment. He advised his men that their fate was sealed. So he drew his sword, he drew a line in the soil, and told his men to either surrender and leave the Alamo, take their chances, or cross the line and join him in defending the site to death. All but one man stayed, and a man named Moses Rose escaped and lived to tell the story. And there is a bar just outside the site that bears his name. Hence the metaphorical phrase, to draw a line in the sand. Finally then, moving on to the main museum, which is excellent. They have all sorts of exhibits there that include this lovely painting of the site, battle site, and a huge model of the fort, and a timeline of the battle. And to our surprise, we heard the dulcet tones of Phil Collins narrating the video. Now, interestingly, he has been a lifelong enthusiast of the Alamo, and he has donated a vast number of artifacts on the understanding that the Texas state government created a museum at the Alamo. So it's thanks to him that the museum is there. And it's an absolute must place to visit on any travel itinerary. Now, the second place I want to talk to you about is a place called Paint Rock. Now, Texas hosts a number of rock art sites painted by Native Americans, prehistoric people, and more recently by contemporary graffiti artists. The Paint Rock site is located about 2 miles outside of the small town, which is also called Paint Rock, in Concho County. And it's considered to be one of the major rock art sites in Texas. It's approximately 3-hour drive from drive northwest of the state capital, again at Austin, and it sits on the Concho River, concho meaning shell in Spanish. Now the pictographs are spread over half a mile on a 70-foot bluff made up of limestone shelves, and there are approximately 1,500 paintings. It's impossible to date them precisely, but believed to be at least 1,000 years old. Now the predominant colours of the paintings are red, yellow, orange, black and white. The red, yellow and orange pigments are from iron oxides, and the black and the white are from carbon and chalk naturally occurring in the rock. Now the site has been privately owned since 1886 by the Campbell family. Historic vandalism has been rampant. It's thought that a quarter of all the paintings have been damaged either by the weather or scribbled over. Fortunately, the present owners have been vigilant in protecting the site and conducting private tours. This 71-year-old guide was a guy called Bill Campbell. He was quite a character. Now, there are no shortage of theories, no way of knowing the true meaning of these pictographs, but very often they are difficult to decipher. But despite the vandalism, we can still clearly see the paintings depicting many different subjects. So we've got lots of human figures, we've got animals, especially horses, buffalo and deer, indicating that they were very abundant at the time. There's lots of curious geometric designs and handprints as well, perhaps indicating directions. And there were a number of paintings believed to be of astronomical significance. For example, solar markers. So back in 1996, Kay Campbell, who was Bill's mother, wondered if any of the paintings were of astronomical meaning. She contacted the archaeoastronomer Dr. Robert Robbins from Texas University and followed his suggestions. She went to observe a little bit further. And later on in that same year, exactly on the December solstice, she discovered a dagger, or a slither of sunlight sliced through a shield pictograph at precisely 12 noon. Now the dagger is formed by sunlight shining through a crack on the rocks above the pictograph. 2 years later, a similar alignment was found at another pictograph at summer solstice, again dead on noon. Now the interaction of the sunlight and shadow on rock art is known as a solar marker, and subsequently they have found at least 12 more of these. Other pictures depict the sun, the moon and the stars. This image is believed to be the eclipse sun, and the circle with the wings is the emerging sun. Other paintings are believed to represent the Crab supernova of AD 1054 and of the supernova in 1572. Now, I think it's fair to say that all rock art throughout the world, these paintings, they're not just careless markings. These ancient people put a lot of thought into what they were trying to communicate. The site we were at, very rustic, totally uncommercialised, not a Coca-Cola site sign in sight, and some people to believe it to be a very, very special spiritual place. It's well worth a visit if you're ever in this part of Texas. And now now for a few pictographs of our own. Now over to Tim. This is us enjoying the eclipse at our eclipse site at Waxahachie.
Yes, can't really say much about that one. So we had quite a nerve-wracking time, the days leading up to the eclipse. We had our resident astronomer from the BBC, Pete Lawrence, from the Sky at Night, and he'd been doing predictions about the weather and various, different locations where we were. And he said it was going to be clear, and then the weather changed. The last couple of days, or the day before, it started getting cloudy, and so basically, as the morning progressed, we had this high cloud, but it was clearing, and we managed to get totality. By the time it got to totality, it was still cloudy but clearing, and the only other shot I've got is this one. So managed to get totality. It was an amazing corona, and you could see those orangey bits. You could see prominences trying to come out. Other guys have got much better pictures than this with the actual prominences, so you'll see those in a minute. That's all, really.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay, the next pictures I think are of Paula and my itinerary. We joined Sue and Tim and that party that they've just described. We caught them at the end of their visit. It was the start of our visit. So we flew into Dallas. We joined them at Waxahachie for the eclipse, and for 2 days before when we went to see a rodeo. And then we did the journey that we went to Galveston, Houston, San Antonio. You can see the map there. But somebody else who was in that group, oh boy, the motorways. Crikey, more exits and entries than the whole canon of Shakespeare around Dallas. Quite difficult to negotiate. You do need a co-driver. But that is the site of where we were. There's Dallas. That path is about 100 miles wide, 119 miles wide, I think it is. So can you imagine an eclipse covering all the region of England from London to Birmingham and North Birmingham? So it meant that there was plenty of accommodation. I didn't book my accommodation until I booked the accommodation for the eclipse on the 29th of December, and I booked the flights on the 5th of February. But there's so much accommodation there, they couldn't hike the prices in the way that they did in Cornwall in 1999. So we found a motel. It was cheap, basic, but it was brand new. It wasn't even on the sat-nav, we couldn't find it, but it was spanking new, and it was very good for our purposes. And it was about half an hour from Waxahachie, where we joined Sue. We left Pete Lawrence to do all the thinking on this occasion. I've done that sort of thing before, organising eclipses, and it was nice to be a passenger. So that's where we were, south of Dallas. And there's the times of the eclipse. You can see there we had 4 minutes, 15 seconds of totality. And the sun had culminated just 10 minutes before, so it was just after local midday, which meant the sky, the sun was very high in the sky, and you can see the shape of the shadow is quite circular, really. It's quite circular. It's still not overhead, but that was a very high sun. That was the sky when we arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth on the Thursday. The eclipse was on the Monday. We arrived on the Thursday, and we stayed in a hotel 10 minutes walk from the Kaihar place, which we picked up the car the next day. But what fantastic sky! But as Sue and Tim were saying, that the forecast for the coming days wasn't that at all. That's the site where we saw the eclipse with the party on the hotel there, the nice big space. And that was before the eclipse. That other photograph you saw just now was after the eclipse, and you can see the cloud there. That gives you an idea of the anticipation we had of quite a bit of cloud. But with an eclipse lasting 4 minutes, we were confident we were going to get some clearings. But in fact, it was much better than that, as it turned out. So there's our site. That's the Sky Night team. There's Paul Abel. There's Pete Lawrence, there's Kevin McNulty, John Culshaw. Talking to him, we were saying that the Americans love to hear the English accent, and I asked John if he had a Texan drawl to avoid the question. That he came out with this lovely Texan drawl. He can do any voice that you care to think of. So he was there. I think this is your friend there, Paul, is it? From the Globe? Yeah, I mean, it's no coincidence to meet fellow astronomers there, but Paula works at the Globe Theatre in London, and this lady here in the blue top, she was a volunteer who knows Paula. And it turned out in conversation that I was able to identify her because she had the idea of using, you know, you like to use a colander to get crescent shadows. She had the idea of using a Ritz biscuit. So you can see there in the corner, she was using a Ritz biscuit to cast shadows. Here, you can just about make out some crescent shadows there. In fact, it's the inverse of a shadow, isn't it? But that's the sun poking through some leaves. So that's the site where we were. That's my setup there, because what I have been doing during eclipses is I've been measuring the colour of light during the eclipse. That's the setup. I tend to scavenge local materials. I managed to get those boxes from a B&Q, I'll call it, which was opposite our motel. I scavenged the table and the chairs from IKEA. Not quite scavenging, but we bought the table and chairs so that I could set up. That's the setup. The boxes were terrific. I was able to put my computer in there. The spectrometer is there. I'll talk about this more when I've got the results, when I've analysed them, and I'll give a talk on this later on in the year, so I'll dwell on it then. But it was a terrific setup, and I think Tim was saying to Sue that he liked the setup so much he wanted one at home when he got back.
It looked like mission control.
Yeah, no, it was extremely good because, of course, with the computer screen I needed to be shaded. But these boxes I got from the B&Q, terrific, and shelves. The only thing that went wrong was I lost my notebook. I don't know, I might have left it in the hotel, but the notebook, I was making quite a few notes on the eclipse and recording temperatures and the like. Bit of a nuisance, but it's not terminal. Anyway, that was my setup. And that's that's a fibre optic pointing at that white triangle of spectralon, which is the most reflective material known. And I was analysing I collected 7,000 spectra, and I had a GoPro, which I've converted into a video, but the intention wasn't to get a video, it was so that I could match up the state of the sky to the spectra. That was after the eclipse. That was perhaps just before or after we spoke to you last month. And you can see there how very clear the sky is. It was terrific how it cleared. And that again is after the eclipse. Again showing how clear the sky was. Okay, so here we've got a couple of images. That is a still. I also used my phone camera on a stand, and I just took a photograph of the scene there. And here's a still. Okay, that's totality. And there's before the eclipse, a few moments before totality. And there's totality itself, the dramatic change in the light. And there's the sun eclipsed. And that, I think, is Venus. Is that a movie? No, I don't think it is. The movie comes a little later. Now, that was a state of cloud taken by a satellite, but I'm not sure when it was taken exactly. I saw this on the internet. I downloaded it without paying attention to what time of day it was taken. I don't know. The way that we had that clearing, I don't know if it was cloud clearing or whether it was a genuine gap, because look, you can see there's a gap there in the cloud, and I wonder if that was the gap that passed over us, because the centre of the action, the state action, where you saw a photograph of the gunboat where the Mexican president was, all of the hoi polloi from Texas were at Fredericksburg under that massive cloud there. So they were clouded out, but that is where the centre of gravity, if you like, of the state's activities were. And the cloud didn't burn off. Ours did, or maybe it was just this clearing, I don't know. This is a video which I've put together. If I can just show that, it doesn't last long, you can see there. But this is just the final minutes before totality. So there were the clearings that I reckon that we were going to see anyway, but just as this cloud passes over, this is when totality happens. The cloud is still there, but it's not illuminated. And that was really it. It was pretty clear then for a whole hour. And there it is, back again. And we have another one. No, that's the same one again. No, maybe I don't have the other video. Okay, that was 2008, a spectrum that I took of the light. That was before the eclipse. That was during the eclipse. And if you divide the one by the other, you get a ballooning there, but it's false. I'll tell you more at the end of the year when I work through the results, but that was a false result. It took COVID to discover that, when I had time on my hands. That is the spectrum that I used this time. The previous time, that software and hardware was lent to me by the National Physical Laboratory in Teddington as part of their outreach. I do a lot of outreach myself. It's nice to be on the receiving end. So that was outreach from NPL. They lent me the equipment and the software. And for this time, I was using a spectrometer from the University of London Observatory Mill Hill. And Giorgio Savini, he gave me an hour of his time to show me how to use it. That's work in progress. This was a rush, and that shows a reddening of the light, not a blueing of light, but this is the red end of the spectrum. This is a very raw rush, but that's the red end of the spectrum, that's the blue end of the spectrum, and you can see there is, if anything, a reddening of the light, perhaps from the 360 sunset that you see all around you during an eclipse. Chris, these are your images taken from the same site?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the... I didn't do anything other than take a DSLR with a 300mm lens, set it up on a tripod, taking bracketed exposures. So I had 3 chances of getting the exposure right.
Right, because I've put all of the pictures in, and some of them aren't clearly perfect, but they all show some sort of detail.
This is about halfway through the eclipse, at the partial phase at the start. Just about to
Sunspots always add a bit of interest to an image like that.
Yes, there was an excellent sunspot there. That's upside down. No, it isn't. No, that's the...
That's the second contact?
The second contact, yes. And you can see this cloud around. And you can see some prominences. But you can't see any prominences on the down to the south of this.
No.
But that's because they're hidden by the moon.
Yes. Because there were prominences, you'll see at the bottom, that when the moon moved up and left, it revealed the prominences bottom right.
This is trying really to get the baby's beads. It's a much shorter exposure.
Yes.
You can see.
So you can begin to see the prominences there at the bottom at about 5:30.
I took as many pictures as I could of all sorts of different exposures. It's the first eclipse I've seen. The previous one was 1999 in Cornwall, Devon. And so that was about a medium exposure from it.
Were you able to set up the camera so that it bracketed automatically?
Yes, every time we pressed the button it took 3 pictures.
Right, good.
Slightly less exposure.
Nice one. You can see the prominence there.
Later on you can begin to see the prominence appearing down to the bottom.
And you'll notice in some later photographs taken further along the path that prominence is more like at 4 o'clock as you're seeing it from a different latitude and longitude. That's a nice one.
Short exposure, just showing the chromosphere really and some prominences.
So that's the result of bracketing.
This is trying to get more of it, so you can
Yes.
see the inner corona is now overexposed. One day I'm going to have to try and put all this together and get a high resolution image. In fact, I didn't go long enough with these exposures. I think the most I did was a quarter of a second. And
So
that's
you see they're slightly different.
maybe a half second.
That's a nice one.
This is a short exposure shortly before the end of totality, and you can see that the things are beginning to happen down at about 4 o'clock. And you've got two excellent prominences. The one down at the bottom that's sort of like a triangle. There's a little S-shaped one at about 3 o'clock.
Make a mental note of those because you'll, as I say, you'll see some images taken maybe half an hour later, and you'll see the differences.
This is the same thing, possibly within a few seconds of each other.
That's a nice one.
And diamond, there's a tiny diamond there, or maybe just a bead. And there's the beads.
That one's nicely captured.
I think that's the one I've got on my phone, or maybe that one. And that's all that. That's it really. This is now back into partial phase. We've got the filter back on, and the end partial.
And back to square one.
Filter I'm using, it's a Baylor Astro Solar fitted to the front of the camera.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Right, I'll just show you quickly, because we are running out of time, some of the travelogue that Paula and I undertook. We went to Fort Worth Stockyards. Sue and Tim saw a rodeo. We didn't manage to do that. But we did see some cowgirls practicing in the arena. Okay, that should. I'll pass on that video because we are running out of time. Oh, there we go. But quite an impressive sight. And then this was cattle droving, I should say. It's done purely for tourists. I let the camera drop there, so I'll stop there. And that's how cattle are moved today. Not quite the same romance, is it? And as for horses, I can tell you, I saw more horses on the Uxbridge Road between Heathrow Central Bus Station and Hillingdon than I did in 1,000 miles of driving in Texas. And this is, we went to a honky-tonk club, I think they're called. And if you look carefully, you might see a couple of Wolas members there in the background. But we spent the day there. And you can't go to Dallas without going to this scene of infamy, the book depository. Palestinian demonstration there. There are some big crosses painted on the road just here, where the fatal shots were fired. And that's the view that Lee Harvey Oswald had. Quite chilling to see it, to be honest.
Allegedly.
Sorry?
Allegedly.
Well, I'll come to that. And he shot Kennedy, not when he was just underneath here, where he would have had quite a large radial angle of velocity, but there when he was going away from him. And that's the model for the Warren Commission and the various commissions that looked into it. And that's the window, sealed off by plastic protection. That's a reflection you see there on the right-hand side of somebody. Dallas building. And this is what you mentioned there, allegedly. On November 22nd, 1963, the building gained national notoriety when Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly shot and killed President John F. Kennedy. I'm quite surprised by that, because this is put up there by a historic society. And when I'm at the Battle of Britain bunker tomorrow, I'll ask some of the historians there about their take on that, because, okay, he never went to court, but there's no doubt about him having shot him. There's a lot in the display there talking about was there another gunman there? Looking at the evidence, I would say quite firmly no, but that is a question which is a legitimate question to ask, but I don't think it takes away from the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald did shoot him, and I don't know why they're putting that allegedly there.
Because he wasn't found guilty, as simple as that.
Yes, I know, but there's historical fact and there's judicial fact. And I would say that I'll talk to the historian tomorrow about it, but I'd like to have spoken to him before today, but let's move on. Anyway, when we went to the Johnson Space Centre, this caught my eye. No stars in the lunar sky. Don't tell me that NASA are pandering to the conspiracists. No. It's a perfectly reasonable question to ask, but the answer that they give here is very poor. It's missing stars in the sky because Apollo astronauts did not see stars from the moon's surface. The Apollo missions were planned to land on the moon during the 2-week-long lunar days. Just as stars are not visible on Earth during the day, they are not visible from the surface of the moon during lunar days. I think that's a very poor explanation because we have a blue sky, the moon does not. There was a presentation on Artemis, and it was a great film, and it was spoken over. It wasn't a soundtrack, but it was a woman who was actually doing the presenting with the enthusiasm that Americans are so very good at. They're very much into the balanced, being inclusive now, because of course the right stuff in the 1960s, it was a rush job to get man to the moon, and they were all white Caucasian test pilots and like, but they're emphasising the fact that there's going to be a man of colour and a woman going to the moon. And this is a question, when I do outreach with kids, I ask them who was the first man on the moon, of course they know all of that, but then when I ask them what is the name of the first woman to go to the moon, of course they're nonplussed, but it is Christina Cook. I was pleased that the presenter that you saw just there, I did ask her about the pronunciation, and she does, I'm pleased to say, pronounce it Cook. And that's Christina's decision to be known as Christina Cook. They're emphasising inclusiveness in this generation of astronauts. That's how it was in the 1960s. You might have seen this before when I talked about Apollo in 2019, I suppose it was. There's one woman in that picture, just one. There she is. The irony is that she was Capcom, and that's today's generation. And there you've got Capcom. I can't tell if they're wearing ties. I would like to know. But that is today's right stuff. And there's our own female flight director for Tim Peake's mission, speaking of Vine School, when we celebrated our 50th a couple of years ago. And you've seen that quote before. That's taken from the US, United States Air Force Academy. It's a terrific quote. Terrific quote. I love it. I'm going to move quickly forward through these. That is the actual podium that JFK stood at when he talked about going to the moon. And if you look very closely, you might see a ghost. But it's not JFK's. I think it's Popper's ghost. And interesting snippets. They called them capsules, space capsules, because they were so tiny. I didn't realise that, but it's mentioned there. They got into these spacecraft and they were so very, very small, they called them capsules, and that's the origin of the word. We tend to think that a capsule, a space capsule, has always been a space capsule as long as they existed, but it was a coining of that phrase because they, as I say, did find them so very small. Gene Cernan, that's the Apollo 17 command module, and that's Gene Cernan talking about it, and he's got a terrific way with words. He's one of the most eloquent astronauts to have been to the moon, and I listened to him for quite a long time. He died, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, so he won't see us returning to the moon. And that's from the slides that we did, the exhibition I'll pass on there. Another thing that we saw there at the Johnson Space Centre was a Skylab, and I was really surprised how huge the Skylab was as a laboratory. There's a model, motorised model, but it's really big, really big. They do not have a genuine shuttle at Houston. They are in New York, Washington, California, and Florida. This is this space shuttle never flew. It never flew, but the jumbo certainly did, and that is the jumbo that used to transport the shuttles across America. Some cargo, and they do have their own. Okay, that clock has put me off. It's stopped. Just right. That is a Walk the Planets trail that it's not just a Rice of Lido, but also there. And let's have a look. Galveston. We stayed at Galveston rather than Houston, and this hotel was one of the finest located hotels I've ever been in. Right on the port. Right on the port there it is. There's the hotel. There's a ship, working ship, and there's a concrete ship. You will not be surprised to see that it's sunk. Galveston, very pretty. There's the ship, the sailing ship, lovely sight. There's the crescent moon, couldn't resist that ship. Trains. But as we were leaving Galveston, we were going across this level crossing, and you know how long trains are in America, and when they've got 3 units on the front, you cut the engine. In America, engines don't cut out automatically when you stop. You have to do it deliberately. But 17 minutes later, the last wagon went through.
Wow.
Okay, we've seen that. We've seen that. Real guns could still be fired. Cowboy capital, music. Lots of music in Austin. That was JFK's, sorry, not JFK, LBJ. Lyndon Baines Johnson, that's where he grew up, in Johnson City. That's his father's study, kitchen. There he is with astronauts and Wernher von Braun. And it was Johnson who saw the Apollo program through. Apollo 8 went to the moon when Johnson was still president. I think some of us know a certain Hans who might be amused by that quote. And he wrote into law a very important Education Act, and he signed it at the desk with his primary school teacher there where he went to school as a kid. And that was the visitor centre, LBJ's ranch. They held an event there for the Eclipse. There's the advertising. There's his grave. Washington, that's the Senate House in Austin. Music everywhere. Max Alexander, he was dedicated. He didn't have anything else to do. He had to go to America to take his photograph because he's working on a project. He's done big projects in the past. And he wanted to see it with me, but I said no, because I could see that his priorities were different to mine. He drove 6.5 hours to be sure of catching clear skies. I didn't. I'm glad he got his image, otherwise he mightn't speak to me again. This is just one a friend took. A friend took this photograph there at Effingham, between St. Louis and Indianapolis. And look how close he was to the edge, yet he still had 1.5 minutes. He still had 1.5. You don't have to be on the centre line, the centre of the centre line. You can be pretty close to the edge, and you can still get a decent eclipse. That's something I did for a previous eclipse, showing how you lose very little. If you slice off a tomato, you get most of the width straight away. Anyway, that's an analogy I won't press. And Mike Floyd, who has joined us on eclipse trips before, being Mike, he booked very late, but he saw it his eclipse successfully. And the next eclipse is the next one in Europe in 2 years. No, it's in 2 years' time, August 26. And I think Kwong has already gone to Spain. Maybe he's still there looking for a site. Kwong. Oh, I see. Okay, right. Because Kwong Man, he went to Spain a couple of weeks ago to check out locations. And that's the eclipse following that, which passes through Luxor. Okay, that's it. There is a future talk that I mentioned that I'll give when I've got some way through my results about measuring colour. Okay, thank you. David.
Here we are. I hope you can hear me. Hope you can hear me well. I've had an awful lot of observations submitted, despite the last month started very cloudy and has been very cloudy for the last month. We've had a very good period suddenly, and there's quite a bit to say. Now, Wolas has been on its annual trip to Llanakinda Farm in mid Wales, and we had one splendid clear night. The first night we were there, Friday night, was cloudy, but Saturday night was completely clear. We were there later in the year than we usually are, so and being well to the west, it gets dark rather late, so it was astronomical twilight by about 11 p.m, and then we had about 4 hours of astronomical darkness. So we had a really good observing session on that Saturday night, and we stayed up there till about 3 or 4 a.m. Then the next night it was cloudy again, but we did very well on that Saturday night, and we had interesting walks as well around the local area on Saturday. And on Sunday it rained a lot, so a lot of us went to see an interesting garden. And that picture was that till 11. Right, that's a bonus then. So more eclipses. I wanted to get all the eclipses into Stuart's presentation, but some others arrived very late in the day. So Stephen Karp was actually on a ship off the Mexican coast, and he says that at Mazatlan, where they were supposed to be, it was cloudy, and so the captain of the ship was able to steam off and steer it into a clear area. And he, despite the difficulties of operating a camera on a ship, Stephen did quite well, and he got all these pictures of the eclipse, a nice sequence. So well done. And that is also, that's by Stephen as well, I think. Is that by Stephen? No, it's not. This picture is. The screen isn't showing the whole. The screen isn't showing the whole picture. That's the reason. It's a bit low. Yeah. Do you raise it somewhat? That's it. Right. A new member joined in February. Brian Conway went to Dallas, and he took some pictures of the eclipse with a DSLR, handheld, and so there's the diamond ring. That's lovely. Yes, that's fine. Lovely. No, that'll do. So, thanks, Brian. Yes, so Robin managed to capture the new moon just after, just one day after the eclipse, 25.5-hour-old moon following the eclipse of the 8th of April. So that was taken on the 9th of April with a 432mm lens from Blackwell Heath in Buckinghamshire. Because at this time of year, we have the setting new moon descending to the horizon at a very steep angle near the spring equinox. So Robin was able to get that picture, and very similar from America, from Galveston, Texas. Stuart managed to get that. You see the different angle of the moon. It's like it's a cradle shape, as seen from the lower latitude of Texas. So I thought this month the focus would be mainly on the eclipse, but in fact I think the eclipse has been well and truly upstaged, and it's now history, because the sun has been doing exciting things, and as a consequence of that, exciting things have been happening in our atmosphere, in our ionosphere. So you saw on the pictures of the eclipse where sunspots were visible during the partial eclipse. There were not many sunspots on the sun then, but 2 weeks later, in late April, suddenly a lot of spots appeared on the sun. So here's a couple of spot groups that I captured on April the 29th with my 100mm refractor and Barda solar film and an infrared filter, and that's a stack of a video of images. But in the next few days, the sunspots got even bigger and larger in number. And so this is the 7th of May, and Douglas Adams got this splendid picture with his C-Star automated telescope, 50mm telescope, and Barda solar film and a yellow filter. Douglas takes all his images from indoors now. He sets this computerized telescope, this smart telescope, up outside, and he communicates with it over Wi-Fi using his phone, and he's able to take pictures of the sun and nighttime objects as well, and he's helpfully labelled the active areas. So the big one is 3668 and 3664 there, and they actually merge together in the few days following this, and they are one of the biggest sunspot groups that has been seen in modern times. You can see this, or you could in the last few days. It's got rather close to the edge of the sun now. It's just going round the limb now, but around the 7th, 8th, 9th of May, you could actually see this with the naked eye if you used eclipse glasses. This group of spots was so big, and about the time that Douglas took this picture, or shortly after, it sent out a massive flare, and this sunspot group has been sending out massive solar flares, ejections of particles, coronal mass ejections, which 3 days later collide with the upper atmosphere of the Earth to this result. And so, on the night of the 10th to 11th of May, these particles collided with our ionosphere, and we got the biggest auroral storm for decades, if not centuries. There's some discussion, was this the biggest auroral storm since the Carrington storm of 1859? I'm not sure, maybe there's been some good ones in between, but it was certainly one of the best. It was certainly only a few times in a lifetime you get an auroral storm of this scale. So the auroral oval was over England, and aurora was seen well into the continent of Europe. Robin Scadrell used a fisheye lens from Flackville Heath to get this one. You see all these rays are converging in what's called the auroral corona, which is overhead, or more or less overhead. I think that star you can see there is Arcturus. Where I was, you could see the auroral corona converging to a point between Arcturus and the tail of the Great Bear. And so this was so bright, it was seen even in light polluted areas of London. The colours, everybody said the colours were very clear. Normally when you see aurorae, they're just a dull white to the eye, and you only get the colours with cameras. But on this occasion it was so intense that the colours were very clearly visible to most people. And lots of people have provided images. So here is images from Srinath, taken from Boreham Wood on that evening. And here's some more that Srinath took. And you see, generally you get the blue colours higher up and the reddish colours lower down. And here is one from Chris Rowland, taken in High Wycombe. And another one from High Wycombe. This was taken with an EOS 600 600D DSLR 12mm lens. So you need a short focal length really to give a good idea of the aurora, and you never capture the whole thing. You only get a part of it unless you have an all-sky lens. 10 seconds exposure at f4, 100 ISO. And you see cameras capture these colours beautifully, but not consistently. Different cameras give slightly different colours, and this camera gave a different colour again. This is from Stephen Karp in Edgware, taken just before midnight on the 10th of May. So I'd never seen an aurora from England, and bizarrely, the day that there was an aurora from England, I'd gone to Scotland, where I did see it. Here's a John Davies picture taken from Ealing. Slightly different colours again. And this was a 2-second exposure on an iPhone 14, and the smartphones and iPhones seem to give, if you can set them to do long exposures, they can give pretty good images of the aurorae. And it was seen further south than London. We have a member, Simon. No, it's not a member. He's the son.
He's my son.
He's your son, and he lives in he lives in Wokingham, and that's his image. It looks like it's probably handheld because the stars are a little bit streaked out.
It was.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure.
So it's possible to take decent images of aurorae even with a handheld phone camera. And there's another one.
There's another one. Yes, yeah.
That's and you can see the stars very clearly in that picture. Yeah, he managed to hold that really still. Yeah. And I was in Greenock on the Clyde near Glasgow in Scotland for a BAA meeting that I was chairing over this last weekend, which was a very good meeting actually. We had Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who discovered the first pulsar, and various other luminaries like that. And as a bonus, the aurora. The aurora was to the south of us, so it was. This picture is taken looking north across the Clyde, but actually a lot of the action was in the other direction. You could see the auroral beams coming up from the south side of the sky, and where they were coming together was to the south side of the zenith. So it was actually to the south of us people in Scotland, and that was a handheld image taken on this ancient phone, 4-second exposures. So, moving on to other objects. Here's the moon, obviously, and this is one that I took in February, 24th of February, but I've only just processed it today, and this is actually a mosaic, 2 pictures put together. I'm quite pleased with this because you can't see the join at all. Taken with my Celestron 14. The great big crater is Bailey, and this is upside down, so this is the south area of the moon, but it's as you would see it in a telescope with south up, and that was very close to the full moon in February, and these are the lunar highlands, and this area, partly in shadow, is right on the limb. It's Les Gentils, but I thought I'd put it this way up because it gives more of an impression that you're flying over the moon when you see a picture of the lunar limb and low-angle illumination like that. So that was a webcam picture taken with a fast frame rate camera, Chameleon 3 camera, and about, I think it was 30, it's a minute exposure, total of a minute exposure stacked together and sharpened, and an infrared filter as well. Brian Conway, who's as I mentioned, quite a new member. He's supplied some of his older images to me this month, and this is actually an animation of Mars. Does it animate? There it goes, yes. So you can see the rotation of Mars there. That was taken 2022. Are you here, Brian? You are? Yes, he's here. Yeah, that was taken with a Celestron 9.25, and was that the Canon camera again?
Yeah, my trusty Canon Amazon 20 quid.
Yeah. Was it all taken on one night? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very, very cold night.
Yeah. So I'll play the animation again. Oh, let's go on to something else now. Oh, it's gone to something else. Oh, it's gone.
Time in the sun.
Yeah, you can never get that kind of thing right. I was going to play that again to show you. That spot there is Olympus Mons. That's the biggest volcano in the solar system. And because it's close to opposition there, it's reflecting the light back to the Earth from its sort of cloudy or slightly snowy top, frosty top, probably not snow, but frosty top, and it's appearing as a bright spot. So that's nice. Right. But we don't have any, I haven't got any other planets to show you this time because they're all the other side of the sun. They're all more or less in conjunction with the sun at the moment. And here's an image from January, 28th of January. Brian took this image of Messier 1, the Crab Nebula, with his C9.25 and Canon 1000D camera. So that's a nice link to the fact that I just mentioned that I met over the weekend Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who discovered the pulsar in the crab, but famously didn't get the Nobel Prize for it. Her supervisor, Anthony Hewish, got the prize when she's actually made the discovery. But since then, she's come up trumps because she's been given a much more valuable prize, which was donated by an Israeli financier. It's called the Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics. And that was $3 million, that prize, and she's donated that prize she's given that prize to the Institute of Physics for them to give it to needy PhD students, particularly women, and particularly people from deprived backgrounds, if they need that kind of support. So that's, by the way, about her. And that was the pulsar in the crab. Douglas Adams, with his C-Star Smart Telescope, has supplied this image of Mu Cephei, which is known as Herschel's Garnet Star, and it is more than 100,000 times brighter than the Sun. One of the biggest known stars, it is 1,000 times the diameter of the Sun, and that's 6 minutes exposure with the C-Star 50mm Smart Telescope. John Davies has taken this image of the North American Nebula. This is a narrowband image in sulfur, hydrogen and oxygen light. I think it is the Hubble palette, so the hydrogen alpha areas appear bluish. And that's a total of 1 hour exposures in 2 minute sub-exposures, 1 hour in each filter, so it must be about 3 hours in total. And that is with a 350mm focal length refractor. It's a very big object, so it's more than a degree across the North American Nebula. I was taking pictures of the North American Nebula from Anakinda this year, actually, but I haven't had time to process them because I've been to so many other meetings. So maybe I'll see those next time. So John has also taken this object, Sharpless 2101, the Tulip Nebula, again in narrow band. I presume was this with the refractor or with the oscillestron?
It's the refractor.
The refractor. So that's the Tulip Nebula, and here is a detail of this picture. And the detail has an interesting thing, which I don't think we've ever had a picture of before. Cygnus X1, the X-ray source, also known as V1357 Cygni, and it's giving out lots of radiation, and the radiation is pushing away the gas, and there is a shock in the gas, and that's what this detail of John's picture shows. And Cygnus X1 is, what's it believed to be? It's believed to be a black hole.
It's a double star and one of them's a black hole.
So it's
the first black hole that was sort of established.
So it's a star orbiting a black hole, basically, and sucking off material. So, Srinath was in Anakinda in Wales, and on the Saturday night he got lots of images, and here's some of them. These are quite short exposures in total, 4 minutes for Messier 13 on the left, the globular cluster, and 18 minutes in total for the Messier 27, the Dumbbell Nebula. Some galaxies, Messier 51, and this just shows you with the smart telescope you can get a lot done in a short time, because he only had about 3 hours imaging time that night while it was genuinely dark, and he got through a lot of objects. Messier 51, the Whirlpool Nebula on the left, Messier 101, the Pharos Galaxy, all taken with the same telescope, and there's Messier 81 in Ursa Major on the left, and Messier 82, the Cigar Galaxy, on the right there. More galaxies, more unusual ones really, from from Duncan Radmorn, taken in Hatch-End, 21st of April, with his Celestron 11, and with a Barda filter, light pollution filter, and an ASI 294 MC Pro camera. This is 29 3-minute exposures, so quite a lot of exposure of the Bear's Paw galaxy. Apparently, it does look like a bear's paw. It's this thing at the top, that's the Bear's Paw. And there are lots of other minor galaxies which he has listed there. They've got PGC numbers, so they're not in the NGC catalogue, so they're pretty tiny ones, pretty faint ones. And there's this IC2233, so it's lengthy, sort of needle-shaped galaxy there, Aegon Spiral Galaxy. So a lot of galaxy captured there in that long exposure from Hatch-End. And Dewey van der Meer, using another smart telescope, his Equinox, took a 73-minute exposure of this galaxy, NGC 2903, which is in Leo. It's one of the nicest galaxies that is not in Messier's catalogue, and it doesn't really have a nickname, but we've given it a nickname now. We've decided to call it the Lion's Mouth Galaxy, because it is just where you would imagine the mouth of Leo the lion to be facing into. And it's a nice barred spiral galaxy. You can see the bar is vertical there. That's the bar. So that's another smart telescope image. Moving on. Brian Conway supplied this animation. This is Messier 101, it's known as the Fireworks Galaxy, and it had a supernova. He didn't actually tell me when the supernova was, but I looked it up, and it was May last year, so it was exactly a year ago. This is taken with his Celestron 9.25, and the animation shows the supernova coming and going. Pretty bright it was. So, this is where we are now. We're approaching the next first quarter moon, and the next new moon will be the 6th of June, but of course will be into the very light nights. There will be no genuine astronomical darkness really until we get to the early part of August now. The planets, as I mentioned, are all the other side of the Sun. They're all almost exactly in conjunction with the Sun. Saturn has just come out of conjunction now and is just in the morning sky. It's 6 degrees high at dawn. Mars is following it round. Mars is only 2 degrees high at dawn, but you might just catch Saturn, certainly with binoculars, in the morning sky. And interestingly, it's been very close to the last quarter moon on the 31st of May. So that might be a possible opportunity to spot Saturn. It's 12 degrees high 30 minutes before sunrise on the 31st of May, only 2 degrees to the left of the last quarter moon. And if you look at it through a telescope, the rings are getting towards being edge-on. What we call the B angle, the inclination of the rings to the Earth's line of sight, I think is about 5 degrees now. And next year, in 2025, they will be edge on, so the rings will more or less disappear in a small telescope. So Saturn is becoming visible in the morning sky now, and it will be at opposition around September. Apart from that, there is the asteroid Pallas comes to opposition, but it's not very bright. It comes to opposition in Hercules in a few days' time. 15th of May is magnitude 9.1. So that's the second asteroid to be discovered, but it's not actually very bright on this occasion. It's also not a particularly good time of the year for meteors. We have some meteors, several showers. The Eta Aquarids are visible in May, but their radiant is well to the south. But you might see some of them. And I did see some meteors from Planikinda, actually, at least one meteor. Then there are some meteors visible in the daytime, which David Taliber will be interested in. There's two daytime showers at this time of year, the Arietids and the Xipersiids, and they come to maximum more or less the same time in early June, and they have substantial zenithal hourly rates, and that they're the most active radio showers of the year. There are a couple of interesting comets in the sky. The brightest is 13P, Comet Olbers, which is magnitude 8.5, and it's still getting brighter. It's quite well placed in the evening sky in Auriga, but it's going into the sunset now. It's visible in the early evening, but it's getting closer to the sun. But it could get quite bright by the end of June. It's likely to be certainly a binocular object at the end of June, and it will be slightly further from the sun then. Perhaps of even more interest potentially is Comet 2023 A3, Chuchin-Shan Atlas, which I've mentioned before. It's not very bright at the moment, but it's very well placed in the night sky. It's in Virgo, it's visible around midnight, and it's still a long way from the Earth, and it is forecast to peak at least magnitude -1 in early October. So if it goes according to plan, and comets don't always go according to plan, in fact generally they don't, but if it goes according to predictions, it will be a bright naked eye comet. It will be a spectacular comet in October. Having said that, the latest brightness measurements show a slight downturn, so we're not sure about it now, but there might be some, but it might recover. We'll see. So that's Chuchin-Shan Atlas, and here's a picture of it. This is one I took on the night of 29th of April with a small telescope with a 66mm refractor. The whole field there is just over a degree wide, and the comet is there. And you can see a slight tail. You can see all the stars are slightly trailed over 22 minutes exposure total there. The comet has a small tail, but most of the tail is behind us. Most of the tail is behind the comet, rather. It's in more or less in the line of our sight. And so the comet will become much bigger as that line of sight changes and the tail becomes more visible. It seems to be a very dusty object, has a dusty tail. That was taken with a cooled CCD camera, 22 minutes exposure from Edgware. Finally, I mentioned that Paul Skidmore has organised some stargazing at Harrow Weald Recreation Ground, also known as Box Tree Park in Harrow Weald, and that starts at 9 p.m. on the 24th of May. And I will be there, and Paul will be there, and we will be observing, and Trevor might be there as well, and we'll be observing with small telescope and binoculars. And the meeting point is at the cafe by the bus station on the high road, Harrow Weald. Finally, I've been sent this animation by a member who I don't know, Simon Quinn. Are you here still, Simon? He's there at the back. So Simon was in Indianapolis, and this video shows the general enthusiasm of the Americans towards this kind of thing. We might not be able to get the sound very well. Let's see if we can get the sound. Thank you very much for that, Simon. We'll see you next month.
We're not out of time, but thanks very much for coming. Thanks to all of those who contributed today. Our next meeting will be on the, I can't remember the date of June, and it is first of all the annual general meeting. If there are any prospective committee members, anyone wants to help joining the work of the committee, have a word with me or with David or with Stuart. And the other speaker will be Howard Brown-Greaves, who is around here somewhere, on observing the sun. And that is it's the right time to do it because there are so many sunspots around it. Sometimes there's hardly anything, but if you want to observe the sun, find out how to do it from Howard. That's our next meeting. And the bar apparently is open till 11, is that right? Yeah, apparently. So lovely to see you all and see you next meeting. Thank you. Bye.